Okay, something I warned about a couple weeks ago, maybe more than that, is starting to come true. I said recently in a video, and you can look this video up on the channel, that I thought that these polls coming out were so absurd this year. They were not just showing the Democrats were ahead, and potentially, I guess the case is trying to suppress Republican turnout. That's something I didn't really buy. I don't know necessarily that's a great strategy, because it might also do the same on Democrats. If you think that a race is so lopsided, for example, if you live in the state of New York, you know that no matter whether you go out and vote or not, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, the Democrat will always win in the state of New York. And so there's not a great incentive as a voter to go out and vote. And so you have lower voter turnout in those kinds of states, whereas in a place like Florida, we have over 70% turnout every election, because we know that our elections matter here, because they're always close. So rather than looking at these polls and saying, they're so absurdly wrong, why would anyone be doing this? Because at this point, when you see polls that show Biden up double digits in Florida, that's what really made me snap, because that doesn't happen. Nobody's up double digits in Florida. Nobody's won a double-digit lead in Florida in my lifetime, certainly. And so no pollster releases those results thinking, hey, I did a good job here. They should be embarrassed to release those results. And the fact that they're not tells me that there is some other motivation pushing them to release those results other than just trying to get the election right. Because you release double-digit results in Florida, that's not going to happen. You're going to look like an idiot. And so what I thought the only explanation could be is that these polls were agitprop, agitation and propaganda. I thought that what these polls were doing was setting up the country, setting up particularly opponents of President Trump, your resistance types, the people who think that Trump is literally Hitler, setting them up to think that Donald Trump is going to lose in a landslide if we have a fair election. And therefore, if the polls are so one-sided, so showing Joe Biden up 8 points, for example, that there's no way he can lose, and the only way that Joe Biden could lose would be if the election was stolen by Donald Trump. And so what I said in that video is that the race is obviously much closer than the polls would suggest. That to me is indisputable. And so if Trump is able to eke out a win by a couple of points, by winning a couple of close races in perhaps a couple of Rust Belt states, Michigan or Pennsylvania, or maybe both, while also carrying Arizona, Florida, and North Carolina, which I think is, I don't think that that's going to be too much of a challenge for Trump. I think that unless he has a really bad night, he's going to win those 3 states. And so it's going to come down to the Rust Belt. And, he might eke out a win by picking off one or more of those states. But if you look at how far behind Trump is in the polls, nationally and in those states, that would seem completely it would seem that his deficit is completely insurmountable, and that a simple polling error it would not be enough for him to eke out a victory. Because as we're told, sure, the polls might have been slightly off of 4 years ago, but they've all been fixed by now. That's what we're told. The pollsters, we knew what we did wrong before, and so we've accounted for that. And so now we're going to get, we know we're going to get the result right this time. And so everyone who buys into this, the cult of the Nates, as Rich Barris calls it, at this point, they think that the only way that Trump would be able to win is by cheating. And so when Trump potentially does win on Tuesday, which is very possible, okay, I don't think it's guaranteed. I think it's a close race. But I think that Trump has a very good chance of winning. Let's say, I'd say easy, it's 60-40, Trump being at 40%. But I mean, so it could go either way. I don't think it's a total, but I'm saying that to be generous to Biden, 60-40. But 50-50, I don't think is such a, it's crazy. But for all these people who follow the polls, for everyone who just, casually watches TV news, they're expecting a Biden landslide on Tuesday. And when that doesn't, come to pass, and if somehow Trump ekes out a win, they're not going to accept that. The polls have conditioned them to believe that Trump cannot win. And so therefore, if Trump does win, then he stole the election, and he's a dictator, which, of course, we already know that Trump is Hitler. He's literally Hitler. So how could we put rigging an election past him? I think I made this case that they were going to do this pretty effectively a couple weeks ago, and now they're finally doing it as of today. Now, on Friday, we got the first hint of this, to where the Democrats realized that they were going to lose Florida. And so they put out sort of a CYA piece where Frederica Wilson, a congresswoman from South Florida, she came out and essentially said, hey, I've done everything I could. I told the campaign they got to spend more money on get out the vote here. We're not getting enough people to the polls, and this is, we're not going to do well on, essentially. So we're way behind where we need to be. Look at these early vote numbers. Our margins are getting decimated, which, by the way, as of today, the Democrat lead was officially cut down all the way to 93,000 as of the recording of this video. It's going to go even lower because we haven't, the polls haven't closed yet today for early voting. And 93,000 is below the 96,000 advantage that they had in 2016, and it's well below the 230,000 vote advantage that they had going into 2018. So as long as Trump performs on Election Day, as well as he did in 2016, he's guaranteed to win on Tuesday. And given this year, everything that we've been hearing, Republicans are going to shift more heavily towards Election Day voting and away from early voting. So I think that there's I think that the odds of Trump doing worse on Election Day than he did in 2016 are, slim to none. So Florida is essentially locked up for the president. And so that's what that Politico article was sort of was floating. It was trying to, condition people that, okay, Trump's going to win Florida. And then you started hearing people like Dave Wasserman all week and these other people who were freaking out at this, who thought that Joe Biden was somehow going to win by double digits in Florida, now making the case of like, well, Trump can win Florida and still lose the election, I swear, which is technically true. Trump, I don't think that, I've said for a long time, Florida is not the tipping point state in this election, which is why I think Biden having, according to Donna Brazile, 4,000 lawyers on call, ready to fight in the courts over the, a recount in Florida. I don't understand why he'd do that. I mean, Florida's not what he needs. The tipping point state is going to be probably Pennsylvania or potentially Michigan. But I think there's about a 60 to 70% chance that this election comes down to Pennsylvania. But the Democrats might still win Pennsylvania organically on their own without resorting to any sort of dirty tricks. Not saying that, again, that I would put it past them, but that they could win it on their own merits. Florida, however, is lost. And so today, now what we've had to start seeing is people delegitimizing Trump's impending victory in Florida. We saw a video come out from Miami-Dade County of a post office filled with mail-in ballots that were never returned to the supervisor of elections, that are being, clogged up in Trump's post office system, which, again, with the post office conspiracy from a few months ago, that's coming back to rear its ugly head. People saying, oh my gosh, look, Trump is gutting the post office to try and sabotage mail-in ballots so that our election is a disaster. And then people are going, oh, this is why Democrats are behind in Miami-Dade County, because all the Democrat ballots are being held up by the post office. And then now we've got people on MSNBC talking about, which again, I don't think MSNBC has much credibility. I'm not saying that, you should take MSNBC seriously, but resistance Democrat types, your activist base of the Democratic Party, a good chunk of them do take MSNBC seriously in the same way that, Republicans take Fox News seriously. And so when you have prominent people on MSNBC making the case that, the poll, they're saying exactly what I've said they were going to say about the polls, that, oh my gosh, the polls are so overwhelmingly in Biden's favor, there's no way that they're that wrong. The only way that Trump is going to win is if he cheats. And saying that, of course, on the same day that it comes out that in Broward County they're trying to register dead people to vote, which is not shocking. That's what Broward County does. I've said before that there are certain counties in America that are known for egregious voter fraud. You have Cook County in Illinois, you have Clark County in Nevada, you have Broward County in Florida, and I'm sure there's other, Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. I'm sure there's plenty others around the country that I'm not that familiar with, but those are the four that I typically think of. And Broward, by the way, is the bluest county in Florida. So you can't blame, registering dead people in Broward County on the Republicans. It's very clearly a Democrat op. And so the narrative very rapidly is being rolled out, and they're going to ramp this up going into election night as insurance, just in case Trump wins, which, kind of in the same way that the Russiagate story was was something that Hillary was using to try and counter, the narrative against her about her and her email scandal and all that, and Uranium One. This election is going to be the scandal that's going to lead to Trump's next impeachment over the next 4 years. They're going to make the case that Trump is not a legitimate president because he stole the election. And, it's going to get even worse if Trump wins Pennsylvania somehow. But as of right now, they're already making all of this fuss about Florida, which Trump is going to win on his own merits, without any funny business. And so how much of a stink are they going to make if Trump doesn't actually end up winning? Probably not that much, because, they will have won, so what do they care about trying to claim that Trump lied about Florida? They're going to push, Trump out to pasture, and he's going to become a thing of the past if he loses re-election. So keep an eye on this. Watch what's going on. You can see it unfolding before your very eyes right now. The narrative is building. I find this so interesting because it was, this was so easy to forecast. I mean, you could see it coming a mile away. I mean, the way that 538.com and Nate Silver just completely lambast and try to smear anyone who falls outside of the polling consensus, that to me is just, so fishy. When you see that the polls are clearly off by this much, it's impossible for that to be, combined with the way that they're acting against people who have more reasonable numbers. There's no way that this is just a mere, statistical error. This is not just them being bad at their job. This is not an accident. This is very much deliberate, and this is the only thing that I could imagine all of this leading to. The case that the polls were right all along and that Trump is just a big cheat. And this goes right into, all of the election integrity project stuff. What they're going to do is claim that Trump lost Pennsylvania or whatever state ends up being the tipping point, and probably a bunch of other states. And they're going to say that if Trump, doesn't step down and let Joe Biden become president, well, then Trump is, refusing to step down. Oh my gosh. Trump is refusing to accept the results of the election, even if he wins. And that will be the catalyst for what they want to provoke, which is, unrest in the streets. This is what's being planned. Now, again, I'm skeptical how successful they will be, because the kinds of unrest that we've seen in this country has not been directly tied to mainstream Democratic Party politics. It's been much more grassroots stuff like the BLM thing, and abolishing the police. That's something that the Democrat establishment, that John Podesta was spearheading. And so I'm skeptical of the neoliberals' ability to stir up that kind of unrest. But I think that the hatred for the Orange Man might be enough to help them pull it off. And so this will become their rallying cry as they tear through the streets and destroy things. So with that said, if you get anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.